Oh yeah, welcome to Chef Banji's kitchen. We cooking up some good stuff today. Let me tell you. Oh, you don't even know what that was because we cooking it up too good up in here. I got my co-host over here.
Actually just letting mine burn. Oh no, I think it caught on fire.
Oh, you know, these skills aren't that bad.
I just burned myself.
What if that's what they did actually in the kitchen? That would be wonderful. But welcome back to the podcast.
Welcome guys, I'm Christina, this is my brother Spencer. Welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. We made this podcast to just talk about anything, everything. If you guys have any suggestions or comments about what you want us to talk about, you can always let us know in the comments if you're watching this on YouTube, or you can always let us know on our social media as well, which will all be linked.
Yes, as we have fixed that problem. You are probably also listening to us on Spotify now. To all you Spotify users, thank you and welcome. Yeah, we have a lot coming forward with these podcasts, and yeah, I think let's get into it. So I do have something that I did want to talk about in terms of, I guess, life. I had this thought today before talking with the individual, and then once I talk with them, it's just a crazy concept. It's about like life and death, right?
I think you have something on your
Of its basics.
Okay, there you go.
Of its basics. And I think the part of life that's very interesting is when you come to terms like, I need rest. So you like over rest on something, but you're like, okay, I'm maintaining my body and I'm doing what I need to do. But I think there's also the aspect of death that comes in, which is the exact opposite. The person's working all the time, consistently tearing down that aspect of them. And both of them, in a way, they're both giving out a lot of life, but they're also losing a lot of it at the same time. And why is this like important? Why did this come up? I thought of something like back in the past when I was a teenager and what I did going through adulthood. And I had that contemplation of like, should I work for something to just tear myself down? And I guess it made me realize the work that you do is probably more important than anything that you get done. So the work that you put in, regardless, you're going to put life into it. Same with the person who doesn't, because the person who's sitting, they may not be moving their muscles and stuff, but they're moving other aspects of their mind and whatever they're paying attention to as well. You're giving that energy over to it. So if you want to give life to things that are outside this realm, it is the work that you put in here. And now that's multiple aspects that could be done. That could be here, as in like this place that we're currently in. You could be like tending to the walls, making sure that it's fresh paint, or putting it into the dishware, because people are very like specific about how they want their home. They have different photos in different areas, and each person's different. Like some people will vacuum 2 times a week. Some people will not vacuum for, I don't know, 2 months. They may not even own a vacuum. I was there at one point.
Yeah.
So I think where they put that stuff in becomes very important, because that's how you leave your being here, is wherever you place it. So if you place it in a spot that's not going to necessarily reflect it back, it could be something that is harmful to the individual, but they don't think about that long term. That's, I think, thoughts that might come in later in life, potentially, but you're always hinted about it throughout life. You'll come to an understanding of like, I need to do this next thing. You just have this sudden urge and motivation to go do it. And that's where you want to put that life into that thing. And it can grow and prosper and move forward. I just think it's very interesting how that is life. How you put it, how you do it. And I just think about the reflections of it. Like, let's say that a person played video games all day, every day. That is giving it over to something that is not necessarily here. And that can reflect back onto them, because let's say they did that their entire life. The person would actually end up dying in a manner but they wouldn't be able to reflect anything onto it because people won't really remember them. Because if you go generations down, and we happen to know our great grandpa and great grandma because they had given something to us. We have something intuitively that we can go back on with them. That is not a very common statistic. And that shows how much did they actually bring to the family and how much did they bring to life. Because you can talk about anybody that's famous. Napoleon Bonaparte, they just came out with a movie with him as well too. You can come out with somebody like Beyonce. Had a conversation about Sam's Club. There's like Beyonce or Rihanna was the question that she asked me. Or you can have somebody who's like Albert Einstein. Like the ways that they are known and where they planted their stuff was very important. And that's what made them known today. But if they didn't do those things, if they played into whatever society's things were like in our society today to make it relatable, people who are scrolling TikTok all day, people who are playing video games all day, people who are putting it into the technology, but the technology is not actually evolutionizing something here, there's a loss of them. But all those other people are known because they had done something. That's why actors are known. That's more common nowadays, is being something that's of a higher pedestal. We've seen it with podcasts like Joe Rogan. He's an individual who has been in different areas of life and has impacted that, which has grown that. And he will be known in history to be talked about as somebody who is a podcaster, but he's also an MMA fighter and he's a host. He's not currently a fighter, but he once was. So where you plant that seed and where you let it grow becomes super, super important in life. And I thought it was a concept that I wanted to share, like, you know, with the audience as well too, because there's a lot that can be gained from all aspects of your life. And the time that you use is probably one of the higher commodities in life. And you already may know this as well too. It's just we always forget the things that we need to know right at that moment. Like, oh, what was the name of that movie? Or, oh, what was that? So I just thought I'd share that. What are your comments on it?
I don't think that like everybody, like if we're talking on a scale of being known, like I don't think everybody wants like Beyonce status fame where like, you know, everybody's going to remember her for the end of time. Or like people talk about John Lennon, like, you know, he has made like a big impact on, you know, people's lives and they still talk about him now. But I don't think everybody wants that level. I think it does depend on like what you do with your life. And as long as it's making you happy, like I don't think you need to be Beyonce level famous if that's not what you want. And also, like, people that, like, scroll on TikTok or play video games all day, it's not productive unless you make it. Like, people that scroll on TikTok all day, if they change that to where they're making TikToks or they're a manager of, like, a TikTok page, well, then now they're doing something with that instead of just, you know, endlessly scrolling. Or somebody that plays video games all day, if they go into like video game development or like, you know, writing a script for, you know, a video game, like that's doing something productive with it. But I definitely think that there are people that kind of just, I feel like they kind of settle. Like they, at some point in their life, you know, they obviously wanted something, you know, growing up as a kid, you'd be like, you know, you always dream big because you're a kid. You don't know that there are, I'll say limitations, but you know, nothing is impossible in this life. But like as a kid, you'd be like, oh, I want to be an astronaut, or oh, I want to be, you know, like Beyonce. I mean, I don't think a kid has ever said that, but
No. There's definitely been kids who have said that.
I want to be Beyonce.
Okay, we have that written down.
But no, like obviously as a kid, you dream very big, but I think as you get older and like some people, I guess, like the challenge of getting to what they want to be becomes too hard for them and they kind of just settle for less. Or a lot of times I see this with people that become parents very young. They tend to, I mean, you kind of have to almost like put your life on hold for your children. And so I do feel like a lot of times for younger parents, they do kind of give up the life they wanted or the career path they wanted, you know, because hey, I have to raise this family and, you know, I can't do it and do that at the same time. So I guess it does depend on, I guess, how you navigate through your life. I mean, there's going to be points in your life where you are mindlessly scrolling on TikTok or playing video games all day, but hopefully there comes a point where you're like, hey, this is not productive, and I need to actually find what I want to do or start doing what I want to do and stop making excuses for it.
I like that. I like how you map that out, because I think of almost two endpoints when we're talking about life, although it would technically be infinity, so it would be arrows. So you had a bunch of points in between. You named out some extremities and talked about them, like somebody who's using TikTok all the time on one scale, somebody who's using it to be a manager will be at the other end of the scale. And to have those two ends, you're going to have all that in between space as well too, because when it's in modern culture, they point out the extremities to people, so they try to aim for those extremities. And that's not necessarily good or bad, because that's the scale itself. It's good and bad. It's the scale in its entirety. And where you land over there one day may be different where you are another day as well too, because there are a lot of things that have factorizations to that. There's a lot of different points that can be moved throughout that, because we're endlessly moving and choosing. But I also think there's a one line B path. If there's a one of everything in this life, there should be a path directly to where you need to go. And that's where your pattern switches, because we move in waves. So I think on that line, we continue bouncing like that. But we talk about people who might have a mental disorder. They would probably have wider waves, because they would hit extremities. Or they may have the smallest waves to where it's almost seeming beamline, like they know exactly what they're doing and where they need to be. Those people are usually called crazy, by the way, because when you are aiming for that, people start to have doubts all around you, but also you get encouragement too. It just depends on the waves of that as well too, because it's of the liking and what they see from it. If they actually gain something from the thing that you are producing. And in a lot of cases that can be true, but that beeline path is very difficult to go down. That's where your people are attaining where they need to go. So on that plot line, there are all of those different ones as well too, from each individual that lies on it, and they move that arrow as well too. It almost goes to the direct point, but then over time, if you move the wave too much, you start to miss the target. But then you steer that back to even it back out. And you'll know as well too, because in your life, when those things start falling apart, you start to figure out these different things. And it's like, well, how do I rebuild that to be different? Because obviously that first route of the path wasn't right. So now you have to aim it a little bit different, because you're having these other things come at you as well too. I would just call that wind, if we want to put it simply in a field. Like if you were to throw a ball and you have to try to get it into the hole, and they have these at arcades. You know the circus one, where you throw it at the clowns?
Yeah.
Okay, similar to that, but just think of a hole, which I'm sure there's a game for that as well too. But you try to throw it directly at that hole. But if you have wind speed that affects you on the side, or you have these different obstacles, it's going to move that ball from getting exactly where you need to be. And that's the main thing. It's like, what is that actual purpose? How do you drive toward that purpose? So that's why I would have the question for you. How do you drive toward that?
I mean, I don't think there's ever like a straight line towards your goal. I mean, oftentimes we see people that like attain the thing they want, and we think, oh, like that was so easy for them, like they got it like that. And it's like, no, you didn't see like the 12 years of work they just did to get there. I just saw this girl that she back in like 2019 had started her clothing business. And I mean, she didn't like she just posted about getting like her first billboard like this year, and like finally like getting to where she wanted to go, but it didn't come without its bumps. Like I don't think it's a straight line. I think it's always a wave. It's just oftentimes we don't see that wave. And if you're looking at a person from the outside, sometimes it looks like, oh, well, that was just a straight line. That was so easy for them. They had no obstacles. Like, no, they did. They had to walk around. They had to move about. And sometimes I think people's target changes, and that's okay too. You know, sometimes like you're on that path and you realize, you know what? Maybe I don't want to do this anymore. Maybe I want to do this thing. And so then you move your line. You're like, I'm going to go over here now. And I mean, you're allowed to do that. It's your life. But I think you just have to go after what you want. There's obviously going to be obstacles. You just have to find a way around them. You can't just like give up and be like, no, whatever. Like, it's your life. Like, you can't always please other people or do what everybody else wants you to do, or, you know, just stay stuck because that obstacle's in your way. There's always a way around it. There's always a way to get to where you want to go. You have to just keep trying. And I do believe, like, especially if you like keep trying, I think the universe definitely has a way of being like, I got you. I see that you're trying. I mean, oftentimes you hear about people that like, you know, this is their 175th try and they're like, you know what, I'm gonna give up. And then it happens for them. And it's like, I think the universe saw, hey, this person is really trying. Obviously these obstacles are putting them down a little bit. Let me give this to you. Like, here you go. Like, you put in the work. Like, you deserve this now.
It is the unexpected times that usually drive that factor. I do agree with that. There is something that I highly do disagree with. You said wants. And wants is not what people should be aiming for, because it's never that. It's what you need. And that's what I mean by the line. The wants are the distractions that are going to pull you away purposefully so you don't go achieve what you need to do. That's what the straight line is. It's that beam of light at the end of the tunnel, and you have to stay on it. Perfect example, Rainbow Road, as we have talked about on another podcast. There are not barriers to that line, but that line is wavy and it's a whole course. But if you stay on that line, you'll be there. And that's the line I'm talking about. It's the imaginary line, because you can't quite see what it is, but once you have the experiences, you are driving to that point. And finding and attaining that point is difficult. I said goal. That was probably not the best way of putting it. Nirvana, to God, through chemistry, however you may believe. That's the line that I'm talking about. And that wouldn't necessarily be wants, but it wouldn't be just without that either.
When I think about like needs though, I think about like food, water, and air. Like, I don't, like, a want is like your like dream job or your dream career, or something that like you really want to do in your life. Like, that's what I'm thinking about when I think about a want. Like a need would be like your basic needs, and that's why I said want.
Maybe it is about the diction of it as well too, like what want and need actually mean as well too, to the person.
Yeah.
Because each person is going to have a different way of observing that one word. And what I mean by need as well too, I don't know if you would agree with me or not, but that nirvana and attainment, would that not be a need?
What? Wait, repeat what you said.
So if you were to look at needs as like food, air, water, would nirvana or your way to God or the chemistry of all things, would that be also a need, or would you consider that a want?
I guess it depends on your belief.
Okay. Well, then what do you believe that to be?
Are you speaking like... I'm trying to understand your question here. Okay. So when, like, this is what I think about when I think about a want. Like, let's say, like, you know, your, like, a dream job is building a house. You want to be Bob the Builder. Okay. And so you're going towards Bob the Builder. Like, do you mean, like, your path to that career, or, like...
Well, okay, but how you're seeing that is, I wouldn't say that that's necessarily a career that you're aiming for, because that's included with it. Nirvana, attainment, everything is everything perfectly aligned. Everything, career, people around you, you're getting enough food, water.
That's never going to happen though. Everything being perfectly aligned. Like everything all at once. You might have little moments where it seems like, oh, life is perfect, but you're always going to have points.
But that's the line. That's the line that I'm referring to, because the waves is when you get outside of that. You can always be on that path, but you're going to feel off. Like all the emotions, you're going to be sad, you're going to be angry. You have to feel those. But at that right moment, you feel everything.
But then do you ever hit the target is the question though. If the target is what you're always aiming for.
What's great is that the soul is the thing that gets to know that answer. When you are gone and your soul has passed, or whatever belief you may have, you will have all of those answers. Like on your deathbed, everything that you've wanted answers for will come pouring in. That is my belief. Because why wouldn't it be? You wanted all the answers your entire life. You were going to get them, but only when you die. That's what you're aiming for and searching. That is meaning in itself.
What do you think? Obviously, we don't know for certain until you die. What do you believe happens when you die?
So there's a multitude of things. I know if we talk about childhood, we're going to add the dogs before humans thing.
We need to talk about that really quick, guys, because this is actually funny.
So I think I had to have been like 7 to 12 years old. We have a wide range because I really don't remember when it happened. But I had this thought that dogs and cats and all animals, like you were that thing before you were here. Like you were that energy and presence. And I know some will probably be like, yeah, that makes sense. And some of them are going to be like, yeah, he's on some foo-foo stuff, crack every day or something like that. And they wouldn't be wrong. But but that was my belief. And I still stand to it to a certain extent because I do believe that we have been all sorts of material as well. Like if we were to talk about this desk or what we're cooking up in the kitchen with some all-purpose flour and some sugar, we were these things at one point. We just can't recall it because it's not as advanced as our brain is. It's the supercomputer. So it's more knowing and connective, but you can't make that connection to when you were actually that thing. Unless you have an experience that draws you to that. Like smell, how you can smell something and it takes you instantly back to the other spot. That's a way of almost like time traveling, but within yourself, being able to move yourself within the time travel. It's just the advancedness of that. And I do believe we're even getting to a larger concept. I also believe we have the ability to time travel with our mind. But the problem is attaining those levels of understanding again. That is very difficult to get to because humans I believe, have not done it for a long period of time. Like if we were to talk about pyramids, how they're able to move them. That getting back to that is very difficult, but it is very powerful as well too, because that makes you more connected to everything again. But you get to experience it within the realm and understand the realm. It's very interesting.
Would you want to time travel though? Like if you figured out how to do it, would you want to?
The thing is, at first, most people don't want to walk out of the cave and see the light, because that's what cavemen did. For the longest time, until somebody finally walked out, that's what occurred. People just did not want to make that step. So at first, yeah, like once the person understands how to time travel, I would assume that's the first reaction is like, oh, what was that? Like, why would it be like that? I don't want to do that. Or you're going to have individuals who are more risk-taking be like, okay, let's figure out how to move these types of things. Like, how do I understand this ability? Right? Because like as kids, we don't understand it, but we learn to walk and we learn to crawl, which is going backwards, but it's applicable. It's applicable to this situation because you don't necessarily know that you learned that, but it's already there. Your motory cortex is, all right, let's move, let's go. That connection to the brain. So all of these stems come off of it into something, but we have a larger ability because our ability to think and remember back to things. That's what makes us powerful. What makes us weak is emotions, I believe, because that is one thing that AI and computers do not have. So whenever they're making a decision, they're just going to go do it. It's not like, oh, no, I'm not about to try to do that. No, they're going to just enter, boom, you're at the website.
Not according to the movies.
It all depends on which movie, though. There's a lot of movies.
There's a lot of movies where it talks about technology or like robots like basically taking over. But a lot of times in those movies you see that they start to gain emotion, which we never thought was possible.
But who is that made by? Humans. And a movie is supposed to entertain. That's the thing, because computers sense time. Like when we had to go back to command prompts and putting the code together, it's boom, 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 boom. It's hard to put emotion into a robot, and that's what makes them in a manner less powerful than us unless we give our power over to it. Because that's also possible too. If the thing can overtake the being, then they succeed. But if the being is strong enough, they will break it. And they will be the
I
one.
am a robot. I would say that I would not want to time travel. Reason being that if you think about it, like how you think about like a TV show or a book, which I have a bad habit of doing this, I like to read ahead or watch ahead because I need to know what's going to happen. Like I'll be in a point in the story and I'm like, ooh, if this doesn't happen, I'm gonna be so mad. So then I'm like, let me just find out if this happens. And I do that a lot. And that's the reason I wouldn't want to time travel, because you're kind of almost ruining it for yourself. Like, obviously the build-up in a book or a TV show, like, there's like those filler episodes before you get to the answer that you want, because it's making the story. It's building up the anticipation. And I feel like it's the same with time travel. If we like, I mean, I know you can go back, but let's say we jumped ahead, you'd be able to come back and be like, oh yeah, this happens. Which I guess in a sense might be good.
That's I feel like what you would do in that scenario. That's not going to be the entirety. Just like jump back. What's up, bro? Abe Lincoln died on this day.
But then if you jumped ahead and you knew what would happen, wouldn't you try to stop it, especially if it was something bad? Like, you know, oh my God, Abe Lincoln, dog, you're gonna get shot. You better get out of that theater, man. You know what I mean? Like if something bad you knew was gonna happen, like wouldn't you try to stop it from happening?
Well, yes, and it would alter time. But I also think
But would it alter time if it hasn't happened already? You just know about it because you jumped forward. But then you go back to the present. Are you really altering time?
Yes, because time will change. Because you are a part of that time still, no matter how much you travel. You are still in some bracket of time. And that will be whatever your dedicated physical type of years are here. But that's where you get to alter that, because you're jumping into where you are not yourself on both ends, past and future. Because I think of that in dreams, how it relates that, and how you have deja vu moments. That is a form of already showing that time travel is possible.
I haven't had a deja vu moment in a while. Like a really
But you've
long
had
time.
connective moments though, where you're like, oh my gosh, I just learned about this. Like from, we were talking about this not that long ago, something about the podcast and what was, the yank.
Oh yeah.
The yank. And what was interesting about this is it was a very powerful comment. And it got me to learn what it was, because I didn't know. It made sense, but like in school, I remember hearing this nickname before. And I was like, this is very familiar. Like,
For those of you that don't know what we're talking about, there was a comment left on one of our shorts that was calling Spencer a yank. And me and him were like, oh, what the heck is a yank? And we looked it up, and apparently it's like, I guess what people that aren't from America call Americans. And after we had talked about that, because I had never heard of that, I was watching my show, and there was this Scottish girl talking to this American girl, and she called her a yank. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's a real thing. Like, people actually do say that.
it's about where they're at. Typically, it's people who live in Europe. I don't know if it's just Brits, but that's what it's known from, is that, because that's why the Yankees were a thing. That's why Yankee Doodle Dandy was a thing as well, too. So, yeah, I thought that was interesting, though, that connection happened. Like, that is a form of that, because you're seeing alignment. Or you can say that's a part of your divine path, because the alignments start to happen more and more, and you're like, you stop thinking it's real. That's how like crazy it becomes, and that's how powerful that energy drives toward that. That's what I would mean in terms of that, when it comes to that arrow, that line of the divine, is having all those connections. But at the same time, it can become scary because it's like, yo, am I going to die soon then?
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. If you time traveled forward and you knew like when you were going to die, how you were going to die, would you then stop it? Or
Oh,
would you
no. Okay, that's a more powerful question. Because if you stopped it, what do you think the consequences would be of that?
This is starting to feel like Loki. Have you ever seen?
I don't think so. I've heard of this.
It's on Disney Plus. You know Loki from Marvel, right? Oh.
You're talking to somebody who knows almost no pop culture. You're welcome.
Oh my gosh, this is hard to explain.
No, that's fine. Explain it to them then to kind of correlate.
Okay, well, for those of you that have seen Loki, basically in the show, he time travels, and basically he realizes that there's all these different timelines. Like there's, like if this happened, this is what, like the timeline plays out. Or like if this happened, this is what happened in that timeline. So like I guess in terms of like us talking about skipping to the future and then coming back, like it would be on a separate timeline. It's like, let's say in this timeline, Mars blows up right now. Well, in another timeline, it doesn't.
Well, you just ended it, so.
But that's basically Loki. But it's a good show. You should watch it. But that's what this is starting to feel like, this conversation.
Okay. Well, yeah, because in a form, okay, think about this. You know how there are times you're like, wow, this day went really fast. That in a manner could be like you're going too fast. So you're very far in the future in your timeline instead of balanced.
I like to think of it though, like if my day goes by fast, it's probably, I know how to speak, hold on. It's probably because I'm like really busy doing something. Because like if you just stare at a clock, obviously the time's going to go by super slow, versus when you're not looking at the clock and you're busy doing things, like the time it feels like it's passing faster, but it's not. You're just like busy and you're not realizing how long what you're doing is taking you.
But that energy transformation does that. That's what it would feel like if you were traveling differently. Because then the days would be like, oh my gosh, like you start to, if you realize that you become a certain age, which you do on your birthday, whether you remember it or not, you do know once that comes around that day, you remember.
How old am I?
5.5.
I actually do forget how old I am though.
Yeah, and it starts to become that thing. And then when you reflect back though, you're like, you have a thought. You're like, wow, life has moved way too fast. Or you're like, oh, I'm not moving that fast in life. And then there's the middle. And I think that's what you're aiming for, because what you were talking about is not wrong. That's how you feel toward it. You're like, especially if it's work and you don't want to be there that day. That's where it becomes subjective in that way. But that subjectivity of emotion draws you to a different portion of that timeline instead of a different day where you're more calm and relaxed. Like, for instance, when you had Black Friday, it got really slow throughout the day. And it felt like, oh my gosh, it's forever. And that, in a manner, makes you go into a different timeline. And that's how you keep shifting into the different ones, I believe, is all about the reaction. And there's the infinite amount of possibilities that do happen. But I think when those connections start to happen within that timeline, that's when you're aiming back toward the center point again. Because if all of that just continues to keep aligning and you keep doing that, you're on track. But it's very hard because we have to understand what that even means. We have to experience that. We have to test. And that's why things continuously get better in society as well too. How we become so advanced is that more people, or the people that do, make that large of a change to make more people be in line with their life. That's the beauty. You can say motivational speakers do that, but you can also say engineers do that, because it doesn't have to be the largest scale. It could be the smallest scale, because you may work as a farmer, but there's going to be that person one day who comes to your farm and is like, thank you so much for providing this food. And it's like, whoa, that's like crazy. But you're like very thankful that that happened, because they came out of their way to actually show that. Even though you weren't around anybody, you were still doing something that was productive. And I think the same thing with animals. That's how animals get a larger bond with you, is you show so much care and affection for them that they come back, because love is ultimately what moves us through here, as well as hate. Both of them come together. But love supersedes, because the greatest good will always beat the greatest evil, which I have learned and talked about with a friend. That is one. They're both the same thing.
Yin and yang.
Yeah, yin and yang. That is a good way of putting it. It's a very Eastern-like philosophy, but it's also Western in a way, because Eastern and Western are the yin and yang.
West.
I think the tying in of all of that is always interesting, is like delving and understanding the multitudes and maybe figures of how to look at it as well too, because maybe a lot of individuals have a different perception of what that means as well too, because they'll be like, timelines, what are you even talking about? Time is right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's always different for everybody. It just depends on how you look at it. But hopefully we got y'all to think a little bit, maybe question how you view life and that line and timelines.
Yeah. I think there's always a way to move through time. It's about what to do in the time that you do have. Again, another high commodity right there, time. But that will be all for today's podcast. We kept it nice and philosophical.
Dang, it's already been time.
It seems like it has.
Jeez.
Yeah. Now, of course, there is different alternate videos as well too that you can watch as well, which we will have on the sides, so you can get different perspectives, because each day is different. I've noticed some days we're more of this type of calmness, some days we're cooking stromboli for the rats next door. But
Got ratatouille up in the kitchen.
like we were talking about the childhoods last podcast, it all depends. And I think that's the best part of the conversation as well too, is that there's so much to talk about. So if you would like to leave a comment, share, and like on the video, that would be amazing. Sharing, I think, is the most important, because the communication and the community is ultimately the largest thing that you can do as a smaller member of society, even though you might not be that small member of society, because you're on your way to making greatness happen. So thank you for watching, and we will see y'all next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Right there by your side. Can gangsters cry? Sandy, I've been missing on you. Know what?